Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that some stories and discussions in this episode of Radiant Resilience may touch on sensitive and potentially triggering topics. These may include themes of sexual themes and discussions around pleasure, generational trauma and societal shame related to female sexuality, emotional vulnerability, and personal stories of empowerment. Our goal is to share real-life experiences in a respectful and empathetic manner, offering insights into the complexities of the human spirit and the journey towards resilience. However, we understand that some content might be difficult for listeners. We encourage you to prioritize your well-being and discretion when deciding to listen. Please remember this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice or support. If you find yourself needing assistance, we urge you to seek help from qualified professionals or trusted support systems. Your mental and emotional health is important to us. Thank you for your courage and for joining us in a space of understanding and compassion. Welcome back to Radiant Resilience, everyone. I have a very special guest today that I'm really excited to have this conversation with her today. We're going to go a little bit lighter, I think, and a little bit more fun. I have Jen Wodtke with me today, who is from Canada, but currently living in Japan. Jen is an orgasm and pleasure coach. She believes that when we experience our orgasm and pleasure to the fullest, we move into the divine and become fully empowered in all areas of life. No matter where you are on your pleasure journey, anywhere from pre-orgasmic to having consistent orgasms with a partner, she can help you tap deeper into your pleasure, power, and divinity. I'm so excited. Welcome, Jen. How are
Thank you.
you?
Thank you. I am great. How are you?
I'm good. So why don't you start a little bit with some of your background and maybe how you got into some of this
Yeah.
work, and then we'll just go from there.
I have had a long, windy journey. This is my third career. And I think it's so funny. One of my best friends, her husband is, wow, she just keeps working toward it. And I think that phrase makes me giggle. And I have moments where I'm like, does people think I should quit and give up? Because I've gone through so many careers. I started off as a teacher. I taught in Japan a little bit, hence being back in Japan. I think I left a piece of my heart here many years
Mhm.
ago. And I taught in the public system and there was a lot of, I shouldn't be unfulfilled. Teaching is this amazing calling. You're helping children grow and I was like, but I hate my life. So
Mhm.
I transitioned out of that and I worked in the film industry for 15 years
Mhm.
until all the strikes of last year hit. And
Okay.
I was in my coaching training, but the strikes hit, and I was like, I guess the time is now.
Were you a
Little
writer
secret.
then?
No, I was working in production.
Okay. But it
Production
affected
office.
everybody that
Oh
had
yeah.
there.
Well, and I was in Vancouver, so we shut down a little, not shut down, but there wasn't work leading up to the strike because no producer
Mhm.
wants to be caught in the middle of a strike. So
Yeah.
everybody was sitting on productions, and I was like, wow, there's no work. So
Oh,
I'm gonna follow what the universe is telling me and start moving into coaching a little bit sooner with a little bit less savings than I had hoped.
that's what COVID did to a lot of us
A
too.
lot of us, yeah, all the COVID pivots, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then from there, I just started sort excuse me, started I loved the training and started really getting deeper into what my beliefs about sexuality and divinity and power and pleasure were, and where I wanted to serve, who I wanted to serve, and what felt really important to me. And that's when touchless orgasm, which is one of the things I love to teach to groups. I also do one-on-one coaching where, of course, it's much more personalized to the client's specific needs.
Mhm.
But touchless orgasm is like this amazing experience. It was a major shift in my professional life where I was at a retreat in Costa Rica as part of my training. And I'm in this room with, I think there were 80 of us, and we're being led through these pleasure exercises, pleasure tools. And I'm sitting there on my yoga mat, hands at my sides. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna come. And I was like, and I could hear women around me. Some were clearly having orgasms or leading up to it. I was like, oh my God. And it reminded me, I didn't have an orgasm in that. session because I was like, oh, I just needed 10 more minutes. The story of so many women's experiences. But that sort of sparked something for me. I had touchless orgasms in my early 20s in my sleep, but had no context because we had only been taught that was something that happens to men's bodies. Like female pleasure is largely absent from the conversation. And so when I had this group almost orgasmic experience, it just reminded me that this was something that I had wanted to get back to. It had been brewing in my mind for a long time that, like, if I can do this waking, if my mind essentially has the power to create an orgasm in my body without touch, I was like, I'm positive that if I can just find the key or the secret or the tools or whatever it is, I was like, I know I can take that into a conscious waking experience. And so in that room at the retreat, I was like, okay, here it is. And so I went back home in the privacy of my living room and thought, can I do this now without the energy of all of these other women swirling around me? Because that
and
is a
someone
really
walking you through it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I started playing with it and I was like, yeah, I can do it on my own, and started really putting together what needed to be in place, what I felt the system was. And then I taught a little beta course in it. And I was like, this can be taught. And I continue, not quite every day, but as often as I can, to work with my touchless pleasure. I don't always go to orgasm. Orgasm sometimes is a longer process. So it's not often that I sit down and carve out the time to do that because life is so busy.
Yeah,
But
sure.
the touchless pleasure part, I do that all the time. And it's just, it's deepened every time I engage with it, and it's different every time. And it's so powerful to realize that anytime I want, I can just tune out the world and I can find the biggest thing is I can find that source of pleasure inside of me, right? I don't have to look to, and these things are all wonderful. Partners are wonderful, vibrators are wonderful, hands, tongues, all wonderful. Like I will never give those up. But it's just a shift in our experience of ourselves and our body and the world and the divinity piece to realize that is already inside of us and we have the power to engage with it anytime we want. And nobody knows, right? Like I can be sitting here right now. You can see my hands, but they're like I can be playing with myself.
Let's back up a little bit because I feel like in the past, women have been shamed for feeling sexual, wanting to be more sexual, wanting to be more curious about their own bodies. Masturbating has always been frowned upon for women too. That was something the men did and everybody knew it, but nobody talked about that. But if you were a woman, you absolutely did not do that. So talk to us a little bit about that, and if there are women listening that still very much feel that shame and stuff, what you would say to them. Hi, friend, and welcome to this episode of Radiant Resilience. We are always looking for new guests on the podcast. I want to highlight you if you have a story of resilience that inspires others. Everyone has a story, and I believe that sharing yours can help others feel less alone. Are you ready to share your journey and inspire others? I want to hear from you. Every story has the power to impact lives and foster a supportive community. If you have a tale of overcoming adversity, personal growth, or a unique perspective on life's challenges, I would love to have you as a guest on the podcast. To become a guest, please email us directly at radiantresiliencepodcast@gmail.com or click the link in the show notes to become a guest. Join us in spreading hope, strength, and inspiration one story at a time. Be brave and share your story so others feel less alone. I hope to see you soon.
We definitely live in a sex negative society, and I think it's terrible for everybody, but I think it's extra terrible for women for a lot of the reasons you just said. And yeah, I really believe if you look at zoom out from our sexuality for a minute and pleasure for a minute, if you zoom out, I think you can't deny that historically women's sexuality has been a tool of to control their behavior, right? It wasn't that long ago. If you had a child out of wedlock, you were doomed to a life in poverty because you were shunned and ostracized. And if you weren't a virgin, like you had no prospects, like it was so tightly controlled. And women had very little, if any, sexual expression throughout much of westernized society.
Yeah.
And I think we still hold that generationally inside of our experience, inside of our bodies. To any woman that's listening that feels that shame, it's totally normal. It's a very common experience. I know there's a lot of women listening who are numb to their pleasure as well. I've had that my experience myself. And
And
so what
by
I would say,
numb, what do you mean by numb?
numb, I think numbing, a lot of us numb unconsciously, sometimes consciously, to keep ourselves safe and to deal with living in an
Mm-hmm.
unsafe sexual society, right? For example, I myself, I'm sure you've had something similar, had men when I was very young. Yeah, men yell things at me
Mm-hmm.
out of cars as they drove by. And you brush it off because you have to live in this society, but all those little things happen over and over again. The message is like, oh my God, like it's not safe to be for me. Like it's not safe to be a big boobed woman. Like men look at me when men want to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And we shut a lot of that down. We make unconscious choices to stay safe. Our body and our brains are really wired to keep us safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so we shut a lot of things down and we don't want to feel all of those scary emotions. So we just numb and we can't selectively numb, right? So if we numb whatever feelings come up as a result of those experiences, everything numbs. We numb our pleasure, we numb our physical pleasure, we
Mm-hmm.
numb our emotions. I think one thing that we're seeing right now, there's a lot of female rage, rightfully, that generationally hasn't been expressed. So all of that contributes to, and it's coming out with what's going on in the world right now with
Yeah.
the election and politics and stuff. Like women are angry.
Yeah.
And that just all contributes to not being at home in our body. And there's so much shit that's said about women's bodies. So
Yeah.
that just can contribute. Like it's sometimes I wonder how any woman can experience pleasure in this society at all with all the shit that's
Yeah.
like constantly thrown at us about how we look, how we express our sexualities.
And I don't know how old you are, but I'm 36. And going back just one generation with my mom, I grew up in a household that we didn't talk about sex. I was told what sex was, and I was told that you have that with a partner that you love and that you're married to and all of those things, but that was about it. Like we didn't talk about masturbation. We didn't talk about any of it after that. That was it. And that was the end. And it felt a little bit more shameful to me to be somebody who wanted more. And so I don't know. It's really not that long ago that we're still dealing with that. And it just takes generations for that to change.
Yeah. I'm a little bit older than you, and I probably got a fairly progressive education for the time. We were told that masturbation is normal in
Okay.
school, I remember. I think in school, I got that from somewhere that there wasn't anything shameful about it. And
Yeah.
my parents were similar in that I was told what sex was.
Right.
I didn't get the direct between a man and a woman in marriage. I didn't quite
No, I
get
got that.
that. But I remember one day sitting at the dinner table because we traditionally would do family dinner every day when my dad got home from work. I don't know how we got on this. I was about 14 and my mom said, I was a virgin when we got married. And I was sitting at 14, like I had my sexuality was not alive, but I was like, I'm pretty sure that's not going to be my experience. And my brother was 16, and I think he was the one who looked right at my dad and he's like, are you a virgin when you got married, Dad? And my dad's none of your business. And we're like,
Oh, yeah.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
Still got that double standard
Yeah.
bit, but I learned about the clitoris from Cosmo magazine. I didn't learn that in school.
Yeah.
We learned about male orgasm because that had to happen to make a baby. We're learning about reproduction, but we didn't learn about female pleasure almost at all. And so that goes back to my story at the start with my touchless orgasm in my sleep. Like women, and I don't know how much it's shifted in sex education these days, but women generally have not been their pleasure hasn't even been present in the conversation,
Yeah.
let alone getting any instruction or direction or acknowledgement that their pleasure is vital and important and how to engage with it in a way that is fulfilling to them. The orgasm gap is a thing.
Yeah.
A lot of women, I hear this over and over again, can't orgasm with a partner, but that's okay. Like sex is still great and fun. Like I still love penetrative sex. And I've said that myself, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners have thought that too. And that's well and good. But when I look at that deeper, I think, when did we accept that? Like men don't accept that.
Right.
Like, where did that come from? Like,
I was going to ask you that too, because going back to the cosmopolitan comment, I remember reading, I'm pretty sure it was a cosmopolitan, that the percentage of women that actually orgasm or have I don't even remember what the stat was specifically, but the percentage of women who do not have or have never experienced an orgasm is so high, like way higher than I ever imagined it. And I have been fortunate to not have been one of those people, but I was shocked. I was like, what? And I don't know if that's changed now, because again, this is when I was reading Cosmo when I was like late teens, early 20s. But do you know that stat?
I don't know that stat. I thought the stat for women who can orgasm from penetration, I feel like that's like around 35%,
Mhm.
but I don't know how that accurate that is. And about in terms of women who have never orgasmed, I'm not sure what that is.
It
But
was
it's
way
not,
higher than I thought it was.
yeah, it probably is.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to me. One of my favorite things to do is go out at happy hour and just chat with whoever's sitting up at the bar. And so I've had lots of really great conversation, like the conversations you can only have with strangers over wine who you'll never see again.
Yeah.
And I've had women like just up at the bar and they're like, "You what?" Like, I've never orgasmed. And I'm like, "What?" And then I say, "Tell me about your masturbation habits." So I don't masturbate.
Mm. Oh.
So I think there is very much a correlation. If you've never experienced your body and never
Mm.
just looked into what pleasure you can just experience without a partner, just for the sake of pleasure. And I think that's a lot of what's missing. Enjoy your body just for the sake of it, just because you can.
Yeah.
If you don't do that, it's hard because men get shit education too. Like, and
Yeah.
a lot of men aren't going to come in to a woman who's never orgasmed, and they're not really going to be able to know how to do that
Mhm.
generally. So I think, especially again, I don't mean to get political, but especially with the climate these days, going back to your question, what I would say to women if they feel that shame or that numbness or
Mhm.
any of those things around sexuality, it is an act of revolution
Mhm.
to be in your pleasure. I truly believe that. And a great example of that, the retreat I mentioned was in 2022. And so there's 80 women. We're all doing these sexual healing and growth and transformational practices. And that was the week when Roe v. Wade was struck down.
Ooh.
So yeah, the atmosphere just dropped, right? We were
Oh
like, oh,
yeah.
our facilitator, our leader, I think that very night, we had a ritual every night. So that night, she did this sex magic ritual. And again, there was 80 of us in the room. She had an altar set up. We all had our yoga mats pointing into the center, like pussy pointed
Yeah.
to the center. And some of what she said just, it was so resonant. It was about how women used to do not do these activities with each other in a sexual sense, but would come together and just feel the divine feminine and the power of their
Mhm.
body and the power of their pleasure. Because women's bodies are a portal. Like sometimes I think men literally have to plug into us for power in a very real way. And we lost this. We don't do this anymore because they burned so many of us at the stake. And we've just
Mm.
lost this female practice of just creating this energy. So she led us in the sex magic practice, and we all, to the degree where you're comfortable, we all basically self-pleasured and released our orgasms with the force of intending to change the world at this altar. And it was one of the most amazing experiences of
Mm.
my life to just, and that whole week was just amazing to bask in that
Mm.
female energy where all of us are using our pleasure and our bodies and our orgasm to transform ourselves and to step
Mhm.
into that divinity and the power that comes with that.
Yeah. I love that. And it's so true. It's so intergenerate. Like it's as far back as we can remember. And so that's going to be one of those things that's going to take so much time to change. It's to change our beliefs around.
Yeah, but I think it can be done. And I also think that there is a bit of a renaissance going on right now. And I realize I'm in this space and my perception is probably a little bit skewed, but there are so many women stepping into spiritual leadership roles on small scale in their community and stepping into these roles as like sex coach. So coming back to goddess worship and all of those things. And there's so many women doing that in numbers like never before. And it's so accessible, right? Even if
Yeah.
to anyone listening, if you don't have the money to pay for, I know times are hard to pay for a coach or a program or whatever, almost every coach I know has something free or low cost on the internet. There are resources available out there like never before. Because, like I said, so many women are supporting women like just quietly, and a low tide raises all boats. So
Yeah.
get on Google and I guarantee you, you put in a search for whatever is you feel is not as alive in your life as you would like. Somebody out there has a free resource that you can get started at least.
Yeah. Yeah. I was listening to a podcast a little while ago that had a guest on. Oh, I'm not remembering her last name, but her name is Vanessa. And her and her husband wrote a book called Sex Talks, slightly off of the pleasuring yourself talk, but it was all about the book is all about talking about sex with your partner. And it, like, as far as going back to talking about your childhood and what you were taught and what your beliefs were around sex and how that's led into how your sex life is now. And even that alone, like just communicating with your partner is a weird thing for people to do about what they want. There are some resources out there like books and stuff like that too. So how did you talked a little bit about your job situation, but what was it in your life that led you to want to do more of this work?
I got divorced after less than 2 years. My parents were so proud. Actually, it was funny when I told them, they're like, we never liked him anyway. I was like, okay,
Like,
all right.
thanks for telling me.
It's funny. I said that to some of my friends and my family, and they're like, you can't tell someone.
That's
Like,
true.
you can't tell someone. They have to come to it on their own. And I was like,
Yeah,
ugh,
that's true.
fine. I was like, I'm getting divorced. Anyway, so that I remember very vividly that period. There was so much going on emotionally with going through that. But the one thing, that's when I feel like a sort of a door opened inside of me. I started after the divorce dating somebody that I knew many years ago. We always had a bit of a connection. And so started seeing him. And I just got excited about sex in a way that I had never been before. It's like a little bit older, had this marriage under my belt, had a few more partners under my belt. And I was like, I think I went out and bought a corset immediately because I can wear corsets. I can dress up. I can role play. I was like, I can do anything I want.
Yeah.
And so from there became the first kind of major phase and a little bit of my experimentation. And that was super fun. And then I moved city, like there was so much change. So I had that relationship with that partner. And then I moved cities and then it really exploded. So once I moved to Vancouver, I went to swingers parties. I was in an open relationship and I even joined a professional dominatrix for a couple sessions because I was like, I'm so fascinated. Can I somehow join, watch, participate, whatever? And I can't believe one of them actually said yes. So I think I did 3 sessions with her.
Okay.
And that was so transformative, like that exploration, the freedom to explore. And for me, once I started exploring, it's like I can't stop almost.
Yeah.
Like I was like, there's so much, it felt like there was so much power there. And there, I just felt this, it was just this pull. I was like, there's something here that I need to know more about. There's something here that is so powerful, not just for me, but for people and how people live and interact and relate to each other. And it just felt
Mhm.
really important. So
Yeah.
I had a slow journey into finally becoming a coach because it was like managing that with a job and paying for school and all that stuff. So it was like a decade long journey. But yeah, it just slowly grew into this knowing that I needed to study sexuality in some way. And once I got into like I said, a lot of starts and stops, a lot of crazy stories about a sex school that was not accredited.
Oh
Um,
no.
oh God. I talked to a lot of people. I do still talk to a lot of people that went there. It was great for building connections, but some of the shit that happened there was crazy.
Gosh.
But in my most recent training, the training that I completed, that was finally the training that I had been looking for, I did a lot of the tools and the practices on myself. And I would have called myself up until 3 years ago, like a hardcore atheist.
Mm-hmm.
But as I worked in my sexuality and looked inward for that pleasure and for that sexuality, the spirituality and the divine piece came along for the ride. That's not even the right word. I'm not even sure that you can work inside of your pleasure and sexuality without that spiritual piece,
Mm.
whatever your beliefs are. But to me, they just seem so interwoven. And when I think about my clients, like all of them in some way in their own spiritual tradition, whatever it is, have that divine piece there. Like they're just so interwoven.
Ugh, the things going through my head right now too, though, are like the how a lot of modern day religion suppresses and past religion suppresses the female and especially shames sex before marriage. And I can't imagine that they actually promote masturbation or ever have. So that's so interesting. Like it makes my mind go like, maybe there's something more to that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think for me, the broader conversation is like, what is the purpose of religion? And I'm a bit cynical about organized religions.
Mhm.
I think fundamentally they are a tool to control.
Mm.
So when I say spirituality, I'm talking very loosely, like not you're not needing to follow a prescribed religion.
Sure.
But yeah, I think you're right that, and I think it's because if you control a person's sexuality, you control a person. Like our sexuality is
Um,
so deep. All of us want connection. All of us want
mm,
love.
yeah.
But if you've taught people that pleasure is bad, what's the outcome of that? You have a population that is willing to sacrifice everything. And if you look at our society, we very much the theme of sacrifice is woven in through our society. Like
Mhm.
it's valued, inherently valued. Like we sacrifice for our kids, we sacrifice, women especially sacrifice everything, right? How many women with a career and children have time for basic self-care?
Interesting story that I'll share with you. One of my very good friends. So I struggled with infertility and never ended up being able to have children. And then I made a good friend who also went through a similar situation and doesn't have kids, but she is very open about it on social media. And she talks about what life not having kids is all about and blah, blah. And she recently told me that somebody told her that she was selfish for living her best life right now and being happy with no children. And it actually blew my mind. But there's that ingrained, she doesn't even have children to pour into, but you're still supposed to sacrifice yourself and the things you want and the things you enjoy and the things that bring you pleasure. Uh, anyways,
That's crazy to me too. That's crazy.
it was wild. Yeah.
And if I were a conspiracy theorist, which I'm not, I would say that this religion and the concept of sacrifice is used by the elite to channel workers into a productive society that filters
Um,
money upward. That's my conspiracy theory.
mhm. Mm. Yeah. I think there's definitely a lot to be said about the way that women have been treated in regards to sexuality and pleasure over many years. And now that's starting to change. The world is changing. So,
Yeah. Yeah, we've had a rough 5 years in the world, but I sometimes late at night, I'm lying in bed. I'm like, man, there's been some shit with the pandemic. I've, like I said, changed careers earlier than I wanted to. But I zoom out and I'm like, what a time to be alive. We are living in massively momentous times. And like I said, I do really think that there's a female renaissance going on. And I think almost a revolution. I don't know. I feel like we're on the cusp of women really taking back control. And I know I think about this way, way too much. I'm probably getting off on a tangent, but I read that the Taliban now I can't remember if it was Iran or Iraq,
maybe Afghanistan.
or is it Afghanistan? Can't remember. I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
The headline was Taliban declares women cannot hear other women's voices. And it was basically that women were not allowed to speak in public.
Mm.
And I read those stories and I think, I don't know, if there's a woman in the world who isn't free, are any of us free?
Mm.
And I
And there are
just,
still so many cultures that are developing countries that are still way behind in that. America, we're making some headway. Canada, Australia, women have a lot more rights than we ever used to
yeah,
as far as voting, being able to hold jobs, positions of power, things like that. It has changed so much for us. And there are still so many countries where women still can't even get an education.
yeah, yeah. And I find that still scary, right? And again, coming back to the political situation that's happening in the US right now, there is a I have never in my life seen people in the West be so vocal about wanting to strip away women's rights. And I'm not even talking about reproductive rights, although that's obviously is a huge part of it. But there are people posting on social media that women shouldn't be able to vote even. And it blows my
Mhm.
mind. Are we going backwards?
Yeah.
It's crazy to me. And I really do think like that comes back to power because the people that want women to not vote want those women to be uneducated, barefoot, pregnant, having only had sex with her husband on demand whenever he wants, regardless of her own pleasure. And that's where it all comes back to for me is that sexuality is a means in the wrong hands, used the wrong way, is a means to control
Mm.
the population generally, and much more specifically, much more dangerously, women.
Mm. I think
And
it's
that's
fear
why,
too.
yeah.
Power and fear. They're,
Oh, yeah. The fear of men having their power taken away.
yeah.
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 Yeah. And that's why I do this work. That's the big why of why I am in this space, because I think it's so vital that we don't regress any further in rights for women and that every woman knows that she has the right to express sexually. She has the right to walk
Yeah.
down the street wearing whatever she feels good in and not be threatened. She has the right to have orgasms. All of that. It is her birthright. And we've just lost the connection to female pleasure,
Mm.
female divinity, goddess worship. And I'm on a mission to bring it all back.
I love it. What do you have to say about maybe women who are in relationships with partners and maybe feel a little bit guilty for masturbating or wanting to masturbate because maybe they feel like they should be doing it with their partner all the time and not themselves? Let's talk about that.
I always say that our sexuality doesn't exist in a vacuum. And I think I think we have basically two tracks almost in our sexuality. So we have who we are with a partner and we all adjust a little bit when we're with a partner, right? So we do things that we know they like and maybe if we like something that isn't their favorite, we adjust and we there's a little bit of back and forth, right? So there's your sort of partnered communal sexuality. But then there's also your solo sexuality and that shouldn't turn off.
Mm.
And it shouldn't, in my opinion, it shouldn't be threatening to the communal sexuality. You should be able, both partners, regardless of gender, should have the freedom to play with themselves, literally and figuratively. Go into your fantasies, masturbate, play, experience pleasure. Just again, with a partner, we always are performing a little bit. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? You're always concerned about the other person. You're always being watched and all fun and good, but there is something that is different when you're by yourself. There's no eyes watching you. Nobody is judging you. You don't need to worry about the other person. You can solely focus on yourself. And I think it is so important to give yourself that sexual focus every now and then, just because it's healthy to experience pleasure. That's what's missing. Experience pleasure simply for the sake of pleasure by
Mm.
yourself. And inside of your solo time, your solo sexuality, you can develop, right? It's an opportunity to grow and learn. If somebody wants to learn touchless pleasure, like that's an amazing tool to have in your toolkit that you can take back into the communal sexuality if you desire, right? So I encourage everybody, partnered or not, to take the time to masturbate, to have a pleasure practice, because it is really vital for continuing your own sexual development, which should never go away just because you're partnered.
Okay. If someone is listening who has not tapped into that but is curious, do you have some beginner tips for them?
For touchless pleasure
Just
in
pleasure
general.
or just
Yeah.
pleasuring themselves in general, because if they've been too afraid to try that or they haven't done it.
Yeah, if they're new to it, I would say if they're new to it, I always like to tell people to go at it from almost like a date night perspective, right? Set up the room. If you like candle, I'm a candle person. Set up some candles, put on music, have some chocolate, maybe have your favorite wine, whatever you enjoy. Pleasure your senses.
Mm,
Everything first before you get into the pussy or anything. And then just go slow and just the thing is by yourself, like you're always consenting as you go. So if it's like, oh,
yeah.
I feel I've gone too far, this is too much, or you dip into the shame and you think, oh my God, like you can stop at any time. So
Mhm.
really set it up, take your time. And one of the things I like to tell people is really experiment with strokes on yourself. Like you can gently stroke, you can like use your nails to make harder, like percussive sort of sensations, and just see what kind of sensations you can create on your skin, again, without being sexual at the start, and just like almost like a self-sensual massage.
Mm.
And then if that feels good and safe, then go into masturbation. See what feels good on your vulva, see what feels good on the lips, on the clitoris. And you can go up, you can insert a finger or a toy if that feels good and safe. So really just go slow, be kind, and just treat it as this like loving date night. Like you're your own best lover and just create that. Yeah.
I love that. All right. So now what about this touchless orgasm? Because I don't know many people that even know or even know where to begin with
Yeah.
something like that, including myself. So
Yeah.
what
One of
tips
the
do you have for that?
Yeah, one of the things I also always want to note about that is I know that sometimes, especially women listening, can be like, oh my God, this is like another thing I have to do, like another
Oh.
sexual thing I have to perform. And I want to assure everybody that not at all. You can completely leave the orgasm if that feels like too much or too far, or it might take too much time and effort. Like I said earlier, sometimes for me, like getting to a touchless orgasm is like carving out a Sunday afternoon, which I do sometimes, but
Yeah, sure.
not every Sunday because
Yeah.
we're all crazy busy. But for touchless pleasure, the structure is really not complicated, right? So we need our activated mind, we need our body sensitized to pleasure, and then we just need to bring in some pleasure building tools. So it almost becomes when I say activated mind, it almost becomes a meditation, right? So you're really putting your awareness. If anybody has listening has done meditation mindfulness, how you breath watch, you really pay attention to your breath, you count in and out. You're just doing that on your genitals, right? And it's almost, you can't breathe through your genitals, but it's like it helps to visualize that you can, it helps to tune into the sensations. And you just spend time really feeling like, what can I feel inside of my genitals? And a lot of people, the first time they do this, will feel this might feel that numbness, which is totally normal, totally okay. You just want to keep the awareness there because most of us go through our daily life like,
Mm,
and we don't think about anything touching. Like I can't feel my feet on the floor unless I put my awareness on it. Like I
yeah.
can't feel
Yeah.
my ass on the chair unless I put my awareness.
Yeah.
So we want to train ourselves to putting our awareness onto our genitals so we start tuning into what is there. And like I said, some people won't feel anything at first. That numbness is a sensation. But if they keep at it, I like to recommend do 5 minutes before you get out of bed and 5 minutes before you go to sleep, just putting your awareness on your pleasure. And then you can start to and I do have a book that has so many more exercises,
Sure.
but this is like the very, very beginner one for anybody who's dipping their toe in for the very first time. And if you are able to feel something, some sensations, and a sensation can be anything, right? It can be like hot, cold, bubbly, tingly, throbby, whatever is alive. The pleasure building tool is to like just breathe into that sensation, breathe into the pleasure. And then you just, with every breath, you just visualizing it expanding in this like ball of glowing, pleasurable light inside of your pussy, which is super fun. So that's a super simple, just 5 minutes at a time, beginner introductory practice that you don't need any guides, you don't need any tools. You can just do that in your bed where nobody will even know that you're doing it.
Yeah. That's so crazy. I can't believe there's like retreats on stuff like that.
I have a retreat coming up.
Oh, is it your first one?
My very first one, yeah. And
Yay!
it was so serendipitous. The universe put me in the right place at the right time. And this woman caught my attention in Mexico. I was at a Starbucks. This woman walking by, clearly not Mexican, caught my attention. I was like, hey, I need to say hello to you. Who are you? Let's have this conversation. Her whole business is like retreats. She's very
Oh,
much
wow.
into spirituality, and we had a lot of similar interests. We are holding our first Pussy Power retreat, Punani Power retreat. We can get Punani past the censors, but not pussy. So Punani Power,
Yes.
January 25th to 30th in Tulum.
Okay.
So there'll be some touchless orgasm practices. She's going to be doing a new moon ritual on the beach and a lot of feminine power. Sacred sexuality kind of work. So I'm super excited.
How fun.
Yeah, that's on my website.
Yeah, that's great. And we will definitely link all of your information and ways to get a hold of you. What are some different ways that people work with you? So you said you have this retreat. Do you have a course? You said you have a book. Do you have
Yeah,
one-on-ones? How does that
yeah,
all?
yes, yes to all of it.
Okay.
So yes to the retreat and the book. So the book I tried to make as low cost so anybody can afford it. So that's on my website for $5, and it lays out all of the tools. And then depending how much more support people want, I have an audio guide so people can have me in their ear walking them through each tool. Then I also have a monthly membership where you can join for 1 month or however long you want. And we
Mhm.
do a variety of tools. We do some work with the yoni egg in there. We do some sex magic in there. We do touchless pleasure and just foundational sexuality practices inside of that membership. And then, of course, I do one-on-one coaching.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Do you
So
I,
lots going on, lots of options.
yeah. Uh,
Yeah, I really want people to be able to do any of this work without price being a barrier. So hence
that,
the options. And I can usually work with people on whatever they have financially available to get into sexuality.
that's so amazing because I know that's a huge barrier for a lot of people in general. So it can be, and a lot of the wellness stuff these days it can be very expensive.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if you're so conscious of that. Are you willing to share the cost of your retreat? Because that is
Oh
something
yeah,
that
absolutely.
I've
Yeah.
had so many people that have hosted retreats that are like, it's so expensive because it's so expensive to put on. So I'm just curious,
No, it's not at all. I'm happy to share. I'm happy to share all of my pricing.
yeah.
If you want the audio course for touchless orgasm, that's 169 and you have lifetime access. The monthly membership is $100 and there's usually about 8 sessions in there
Mhm.
each month. And the retreat is $2,500, which is inclusive of accommodation.
Mm,
It does not include your flight and your meals and any personal massages or shopping or anything that
right,
you want to
right.
do.
And how
So yeah,
many days is that?
it's the 25th to the 30th, so 5 days.
Oh, 5 days. Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not so
Yeah.
bad. five
And
days when you consider that. Mhm.
yeah. And this one should be, it's probably going to be, it's the first one, so it's probably going to be small and intimate. So
Yeah. You always learn as you go, right? We
yeah.
just have to, when we
But
start new things like that.
yeah. So it's not going to be the room full of 80 women, but there's something different about there's something different about having a small group and like
Absolutely.
connecting more. So I'm super stoked for it.
Yeah, that's so exciting. Are you going to try to do those like yearly? We're just going to see how.
Yeah, I will see how it goes. We're kicking around ideas for doing a second one maybe in later 2025, but
Mhm.
nothing carved in stone yet.
Nice. Awesome. Do you have any, I think we've pretty much touched on a lot of good stuff. Do you have any final parting words that you want to share?
I would just tell anyone who's listening that your pleasure is a birthright. Your body is yours to enjoy as you see fit. And pleasure is valuable just for the sake of pleasure. Enjoy yourself. Well, I really believe that's what we're here for. We're here for a good time, not a long
Yeah.
time, to
Yeah.
quote the song. So I just encourage anyone who's listening to just feel free to enjoy who you are, enjoy your body, enjoy your pleasure. Um, and reach out to me. I'm happy to answer questions. Happy to do a free call with anybody. I really want to serve and support anyone that wants to step into their, I should say women, I generally don't work with men, but any woman who wants to step into her pleasure, please feel free to reach out. Don't let price or shame or anything hold you back. I'm happy to talk to you and see what I can do to support you. That's what I've been put on this earth for.
You've been so easy to talk to about this for me too. So
Thank you.
I'm not quite to your level, but I'm definitely like been in between. But like I said, I grew up with a little bit more of the shame around sex. And so some of it makes me a little bit uncomfortable, but you were so easy to talk to. And so for anybody listening, if you are a little bit shamed or embarrassed, like Jen made it so easy to talk to. Definitely go
Thank you
for
for
it.
that. Thank you for that. That means a lot.
Yeah. All right, everyone. I hope you learned something from this conversation, and I hope you feel empowered and excited to explore your sexuality and your own pleasure. But yeah, thanks so much, Jen, for coming on here. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you enjoyed our conversation and found value in the stories shared, please consider following us on your preferred podcast platform. Your ratings and reviews make a huge difference. They help us reach more listeners and continue bringing you engaging, insightful content. We appreciate your support and would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Until next time, keep listening, growing, and sharing.